Okay, hopefully I did that right. All right. Well, good evening, everyone. I'd like to introduce to you, my phone just decided not to. Amy Miller, she's a licensed clinical social worker in Jefferson County with a broad range of experience, currently serving as the Jefferson Center Director of Adult Outpatient Services. Amy is an engaging presenter, knowledgeable leader, and a dedicated community member who is eager to bring practical skills and tips to encourage hope and positivity to our community. So welcome, Amy. I am going to put everyone on mute. And so then when you want to ask a question, you're just going to have to unmute, okay?
Yes, and feel free to put questions in the chat or just unmute. Definitely want this to be interactive and, answer any questions you might have in the moment, but I'll also pause at a couple different places throughout to give folks a time to do that if they like. So so thank you so much. We're going to talk tonight about some strategies for being positively you. So how can we, even through challenging times, cultivate that positivity, joy, and hopefulness? And so we've got some very concrete, practical strategies. You definitely probably aren't going to try all of them, but I encourage you to think about some that might be interesting for you to kind of try to incorporate or experiment with, and hope it will be helpful for you. So a little bit about Jefferson Center, the organization I work for. We are the community mental health center serving Jefferson, Clear Creek, and Gilpin counties. We're not actually part of Jefferson County. I think that's a little bit of confusion. Sometimes we're our own private nonprofit. We've been serving the community for over 60 years, and we are really here to improve the lives of the people living in our community through the provision of mental health and other services, including this one, our Speakers Bureau, where we love to come out and offer presentations on mental health and wellness to a variety of different groups. So in terms of our agenda tonight, we are going to be talking about those ways to cultivate positivity, but I definitely want to start by discussing what we mean by positivity, because it can get kind of skewed or kind of shoved down our throats sometimes in not so helpful ways. And so thinking about, what's a realistic way to be positive and to help build those positivity skills. And so some of the things we'll talk about are cultivating mindfulness practices, strategies to build our resilience, that ability to bounce back from hard times. Stress management is an important part of maintaining a positive mindset. It's hard to be positive if we're feeling very stressed and overwhelmed all the time. And then a really important part is making time for fun and for play. I think, that's an aspect that's so easy to overlook or to put at the very bottom of the to-do list. And, we're going to take some time tonight to think about ways we can incorporate that back into our lives, because, it's easy to think of it as something that's kind of frivolous or, nice to do if you have the time, but this is really what replenishes us and, refills our tank and sets us up to be more resilient and more positive in the future. And then we've got, great information in this presentation tonight, but certainly, we can only cover so much in an hour. So I'm going to include some resources for further kind of information and support if you'd like to explore some of the ideas in this presentation in a little bit more depth. So what do we mean by positivity? And, I think it's an important distinction to make. How do we really realistically think about positivity? And so I think in some ways it's easier to talk about what it is not. And so with positivity, it's not, pretending that everything is fine, denying difficult emotions, or ignoring the challenges of our life, right? It's really about finding the balance between the natural negative things that we're all going to experience from time to time, but also balancing that out with time for play and joy and rest and techniques to help us manage the stress. And so this concept of toxic positivity, I think, is an important one. Has anyone heard this term used before? Yeah. And so with toxic positivity, what we're really talking about is, really almost dismissing our own or someone else's experience, often because we're really uncomfortable with negative emotions. And really the underlying message is you shouldn't be upset. And we all have things that happen in our lives that will naturally lead us to be upset from time to time, and it's normal and it's healthy to acknowledge it. So you might hear people say things like, no, positive vibes only. Or they are struggling with something. They're worried, for example, about their child's performance at school. And you might hear someone respond by saying, well, at least you can have children. At least you have a child. And it's really, those statements that really minimize the struggle that someone is going through. Other things like, oh, other people have it so much worse, or you have so much to be grateful for, or just stay positive, or you'll get over this. Don't be sad. You're going to get over this. And so that's not what we want to incorporate in our lives, because we need to validate and acknowledge and honor the challenges and the emotions we experience. And so we're going to take the rose-colored glasses and we're going to set those aside for this presentation. We want really a realistic view about positivity. And so what we mean by that is, can we find the good even amidst the bad? So our lives are complex and messy and complicated. And yes, it's important to acknowledge the challenges and the struggles. And how do we take time to really notice the good that is there when we're ready, when it's not being forced upon us? But how can we acknowledge our feelings and process them in a healthy way to get us to a place where we're ready to also recognize the good and do that both and thinking? So a lot of it is staying focused on the present moment, not letting the anxiety of the future or the frustration over the past kind of cloud our mood or cloud our thinking, but really focusing on what's happening right here in this moment and what can I do here in this present moment to set myself up for a more positive outlook in the future. So it's engaging in things like mindfulness to deliberately notice the good things that are there in your life. So taking time to find those things and to focus on them, because what we focus on gets bigger. So if we focus on the bad and kind of dwell and ruminate on the bad things happening in our lives, that's going to get bigger and bigger until it gets incredibly overwhelming. But if we can find the good and focus on that good, that will also grow and help us, find the other things that are also positive. So part of that is expressing gratitude. So again, it's not at least we have a XYZ, but it's, even with all this going on, I'm really grateful for the people who are showing up in my life, for the relationships I have, for the roof over my head, and doing it in a genuine and authentic way. Again, when we're ready to do so, we don't want to force this too early. Otherwise it ends up kind of falling into that toxic positivity mindset. And, the great thing about a positive mindset is its impact on the people around us. And so one of the most effective ways to kind of shift from a negative outlook to a positive outlook is to do a random act of kindness, to go out of our way to do something kind for others. We have the benefit of helping out someone else, but we also often get a real great benefit from helping others. So that's definitely included in positivity as well. And so we can take action, do things to really cultivate that positivity. So the things we're going to focus on, practicing mindfulness. There's lots of different ways to incorporate mindfulness into your day, and we'll talk about several of them. Strategies for building that resilience, managing stress, but also finding joy, being creative. I'm looking at this little boy with his, cardboard rocket on his back and thinking about the joy and creativity he got to engage in to create that. And also thinking about how we can connect with others, because our social support, our social connections are really so important for so many areas of our mental health. So we're going to start by discussing ways to practice mindfulness. And it doesn't have to be complicated. You don't have to go on a mindfulness retreat or meditate in perfect silence for an hour. I think sometimes, mindfulness can feel a little intimidating, but it's really about incorporating pretty straightforward practices. So it takes a lot of different forms. So yoga is one form of mindfulness. It's about being in the present moment and being aware of your body and your body's position as it goes through the different movements. Certainly meditation or prayers are a form of different forms of mindfulness. It can even be as simple as just taking a moment to really pay attention to our surroundings. So often we are, going throughout the day and checking things off our to-do list and rushing from one thing to the other. And it could be as simple as, taking a moment to really sit down and quietly drink that cup of coffee or sit with your face in the sunshine and just being focused and eliminating distractions. So there's, again, a lot of different ways to do this. Great thing is it can be done anywhere. You don't need any fancy equipment. You can do it anywhere you're at, in the car, with your kids. It can happen anytime. And it's really about using your senses. So engaging sight, taste, smell, touch. And, a great example is you can practice mindfulness while you're doing the dishes. And so you can think about the temperature. How does the water feel? Is it hot? Is it cold? How do the dishes feel? Are they sticky? Are they slippery? How does that change as you wash the dishes? Smelling, does your dish soap have a certain scent that you can notice? What are you seeing? What do the bubbles look like? What do the dishes look like as they go from dirty to clean? What are you hearing? Are you hearing the dishes kind of clink against each other, water splashing? It's really just about immersing yourself in that moment rather than letting your thoughts wander off. And it's really helpful because it just really helps us ground back in our body so that when we're feeling anxious or stressed, it brings us back to that present moment and really deactivates the flight or fight response. We can go from thinking anxiously about, everything that we have in our lives that's stressing us out to being present in the moment and realizing, oh, there's actually no threat here right now in this moment. And that helps our body start to self-regulate. So a more structured activity you can try, and this is great if you have, periods of feeling really anxious, or if you've been through a really stressful event. We'll sometimes use this technique with people who've experienced a traumatic event, who are very activated and overwhelmed and kind of flooded with that anxiety response. And it's 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And so what you do is wherever you are right now, look around and identify 5 things you can see. So, I can see my water bottle, I can see my pen, the clock, whatever. Doesn't have to be anything life-changing. What are just 5 things you can see right now? And then what are 4 things you can feel? And we're talking not about like feeling emotions, but physically feel. So right now I can feel my feet on the floor. I feel my butt in the chair. I feel my glasses on my face if I stop and notice and really pay attention. So noticing different physical sensations that you feel. And then think about 3 things you can hear. So you might hear the traffic outside. You might I hear my laptop fan going because I've got a lot of programs running right now. I hear the sound of my dog walking around outside my door. Different things you can hear. And then 2 things that you can smell. So if you have something handy, this is a great time to put a little scented lotion on, or maybe take a sniff of whatever you're drinking. Or you can think about stuff you like to smell and just think about what that smells like. And then 1 thing you can taste. And so again, you can take a sip of water or your coffee, or pull out a little piece of hard candy. But the idea again is just to really engage with your senses in the present moment. And the nice thing with this strategy is you can actually prepare to use it ahead of time. So it's a great thing to do with kids, to have them have, kind of a stress box or an anxiety box or a calm down box. And you can make one for yourself too, where maybe you put in postcards of beautiful scenery that you like to look at, or you put in a little cotton ball with some essential oil on it, or a little container of coffee beans, or a little bit of perfume, in a container that you can pull out and smell, maybe some hard candies or little bits of chocolate or textures, fabrics, things you like to touch. If you've got, a piece of silky fabric or a pair of fuzzy socks, you can actually plan that and put that into this kit and take it out when you're feeling overwhelmed, feeling stressed, or if you're with a kid that's feeling overwhelmed or feeling overwhelmed or stressed. And let them take out and engage with those things, and you'll start to see them really calm down in that moment. So that's a strategy I like if you kind of want something a little bit more structured. If you're interested in exploring more of the guided meditation side of things, we do offer a call-in meditation with Jeffco Public Libraries. It's free. You don't have to live in Jeffco. When I've led it, we had people calling in from Seattle and all over the country. You just call that number Thursdays at 10 a.m. And one of our clinicians will take you through a guided meditation, which is really helpful because to just sit in silence, if you've never meditated before, it's hard to do. You get distracted. It's hard to kind of stay focused on what you're doing. So to have that guided meditation to kind of help bring you back when your mind starts to wander can be really helpful. And then we also have recordings of those guided meditations on our website. The public library has them on their YouTube channel. And then you can also find guided meditations on YouTube and lots of different places as well. But this is kind of a nice local resource that we offer to the community as well. So any questions about mindfulness before we move on to our next section? Tom.
Yeah, I've taken a mindfulness class before, and I got the impression, or maybe I just picked up on one aspect of the teaching, was that it's a good time to come to grips with yourself. In other words, who am I? What am I doing here? Am I on a path that I like? I mean, sort of metaphysical, but big, high-level questions.
Yeah.
And that forces you to go back over, a lot of your whole life. So it's not something you can do in 10 minutes. You need to really focus on it. And when I tried that, I did find a lot of relaxing, and my shoulders weren't nearly so tense, that sort of thing. So
Yeah.
for those of you that are at all interested, I think Amy's teachings here are valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that's what I love about meditation. You can do, or mindfulness, you could do a quick little deep breathing just to kind of hit the reset button. And as we'll talk about in the next section, you can really build on that practice, and it can have just incredibly powerful effects. So you can kind of, jump in on the shallow end of the pool, so to speak. And then, yeah, it's incredibly powerful. And it ties in nicely with resiliency. And again, with resiliency, we're really talking about the natural ability we all have to bounce back from hardship. And, for some people, this comes more naturally than others based on, their kind of innate temperament or the resources they have available to them. But certainly there are things we can do to cultivate resiliency as well. And with resiliency, there's really 4 key areas that help build our resiliency. So mental resiliency, physical resiliency, social, and spiritual. So I'd encourage you just to think about one area that you maybe have the biggest opportunity to make an impact on, because building up resiliency in any one of these areas will impact overall resiliency as well. So we'll talk a little bit more particularly about the spiritual side of resiliency and what that really looks like. But I love to use the work of Dr. Brene Brown. She's probably the only famous social worker there is. So she's just a professional hero of mine, but she's really a researcher who studies people and has done a lot of work around resiliency and vulnerability and how we connect with one another. And so in her book that's on the screen there, she has a chapter where she identifies really the 5 key features of people who are resilient. And what she's found, or what her team found, is that resilient people tend to be resourceful. They seek out resources that can help their situation. They tend to have good problem solving skills, and those are things we can develop, especially in partnership with others. If you have someone in your life who's a good problem solver, reaching out to them to ask for their support and guidance. I think this is a really key one. Resilient people are more likely to seek help. And so often I think we feel like we have to suffer in silence or go it alone, but seeking out help makes us stronger, literally. And so, that's such a key important finding about, just how important it is to really reach out and ask for help when we're needing it. They also have what we call a sense of agency or self-efficacy, where they really have that accurate and honest belief that there is something they can do to help their situation. Often, in really challenging times, it's easy to get overwhelmed and think, oh, there's nothing I can do. This is hopeless. And while we may not be able to fix the entire situation, being able to identify 1 or 2 things that would make it easier is so helpful in terms of building our resiliency, to have that sense of control and that, sense that our actions do matter and can have a positive impact. And then certainly, again, social support is so critical. So having people who are available to you and being connected to them regularly is also a really key part of resiliency. And so in terms of, the different areas of resiliency, that spirituality or belief system. So, religion doesn't necessarily equate to spirituality, although for many people it does. But when we're talking about spirituality or belief system, we're really talking about what gives our life meaning and purpose. And, what helps us keep a healthy perspective on ourselves and others. So, without this sort of belief system of there being something bigger in our lives, having meaning and purpose, it's really easy, again, just to get overwhelmed by our situation. So this involves things like living within your values. So we do this sometimes in therapy as well, going through and helping people identify, what are your values? What are the values that are most important to you? And how are you living within those values? And maybe in what ways are you not living within those values that you can start to make those adjustments to in your life? What is going on right now that is giving your life meaning and purpose? If there isn't much, how can we incorporate things that help give your life meaning and purpose? That might include things like helping others. And then again, not in a toxic positivity, like what doesn't kill you makes you stronger type of way, but in a really realistic way, is in the midst of a challenging situation, thinking, what am I learning from this? What can I take away? And you might not be able to do that, at the very beginning of, a scary health diagnosis or the loss of a loved one, but keeping that in mind and being able to either do that as you're going through that difficult time, or as you're starting to move beyond that difficult time, thinking about what it taught you and what your takeaways are and how it's changed you. That can be a really important way of, again, building that resiliency, recognizing there are things that I learned from this that I can take forward with me into future challenges. It's also important to cultivate hope. And, this idea of hope is kind of an interesting one, because we often talk about it as a feeling. We feel hopeful, but hope is actually a thought process. It's how we think about our situation, and that's great because it means we can change our thought process. We don't always have to go with the first thought that pops into our head. we can, check that thought and see if that's really the most accurate or helpful. So part of cultivating hope is thinking about realistic goals. Again, for this challenging time, if you've got kids that can't go to daycare because they're closed because of exposures, and you've got remote work and there's snow days and all these different things going on, what's a realistic goal for some self-care, some of these strategies that we're even talking about tonight? What are some ways you can incorporate them in a way that doesn't set you up for failure because you didn't meet this, really high arching goal that wasn't necessarily realistic? And then thinking about ways to achieve those goals. What are, again, some of those practical steps I can take to get me in that right direction? And this key piece about staying flexible. So if you have a goal that you want to get more exercise or movement in because it feels good when you move your body, and you think, okay, well, I'm going to get up early and I'm gonna walk on my treadmill, and that doesn't happen the next day for whatever reason, to not say, oh, I failed, I'm never going to be able to do this, but to stay flexible and say, you know what, I'm not really a morning person. I wonder if I could try it in the afternoon or evening. And being able to kind of not identify that learning experience as a failure, but as new information that you can take and incorporate into the next kind of trial. And then again, believing in ourselves, thinking about the hard times you've been through before, and what did you learn? What skills served you well during those challenging times? And which of those skills can you use during this time in a challenging situation? And then another big piece is really thinking critically about all the information that's coming at us. So, with media or social media or advertisements, there's so much information that, we're not good enough the way we are. And if we just bought this one product or signed up for this one service, things would be so much easier. We would be so much better off. And, it's easy to let that weigh us down and kind of suck the positivity out of our lives. And so, really reality checking those messages. And there's some questions here on the screen that I really like that I think are helpful. So, is what I'm seeing real? Looking at that family on the happy TV sitcom and thinking, oh, my family's so dysfunctional. Well, is that family on the sitcom really a real family, or is it a fantasy? Is that really real life? For the things I'm seeing, the advertisements, the pictures on Instagram, are they really reflecting a healthy way of living for me? Or is this something that's trying to turn my life, my family, my body, my relationships into objects or commodities? And I really like this last one. Who benefits by my seeing these images and feeling bad about myself? Is there someone trying to sell me something here, right? A lot of it is about, the bottom line, the money. And so really being aware of that, because it's easy as we're scrolling, having all these messages coming at us to feel like that's real life. And again, so often they are either people's highlight reels of an otherwise very complex life, messy life, just like we all have, or it's a message meant to try to sell us something. So keeping that in mind is important too. And then another key piece is being mindful of behaviors that we may use to numb our negative emotions. So things like alcohol, cannabis, eating too much, binge watching Netflix, right? Those are all things that, there's nothing wrong with a glass of wine if you don't have, a substance use concern, or watching Netflix, right? Those are all perfectly fine and, even healthy things. But if we're using those behaviors to try to avoid feeling our negative emotions, that's where we're kind of in dangerous territory. Sometimes it's just too much and we just need a break so that we can come back and deal with the emotions later. But if we're constantly engaging in those behaviors in a way that we're not allowing ourselves the time or space to ever feel those feelings, that's where some of those behaviors can really start to spiral in really negative and unhealthy ways. So when those difficult emotions arise, it's easy to feel like they're going to be so overwhelming that we won't be able to bear them. But really, if you can set aside the time and space and use some of the coping strategies of mindfulness, of deep breathing, of allowing yourself to, just observe the emotions, but not engage with the emotions, not feed them with other thoughts or other, really other thoughts about, the story that you're kind of telling about the negative feelings. But if we can just be present with them and breathe through them and let ourselves feel them, they will typically pass, right? A lot of it is about tolerating those negative feelings until they pass. So often, again, with especially with things like toxic positivity, we feel like we should never feel bad, we should never feel sad, we should never feel stressed. That means we're doing something wrong. And then again, those advertisements over here are going to try to sell us something. But rather understanding that negative emotions are part of everyone's human experience. And we have to allow ourselves to feel them and move through them to get beyond them. Because if we just shove them down and try to numb ourselves out with working too much or, watching 3 seasons of The Office in one night on whatever streaming platform it's on now, that's really where we get into problematic territory. So resilient people will allow themselves to feel their emotions, staying mindful about how they're using those numbing behaviors, and really lean into the discomfort, because when we allow ourselves to feel those feelings, we can process them, we can move through them, and then get to a place where we're ready to engage in more of the positivity and gratitude in an authentic and helpful way. Any questions about that? Okay. All right, so we're going to move in now into talking about some strategies for coping with stress. And really what we're talking about here is the stress cycle or the stress response. And so there's different strategies at different points in the stressful experience that you can take to help manage it and move through it. And just like moving through negative emotions is a necessary part of the process, we also have to help our bodies move through the stress cycle, because stress is part of all of our experiences, but it's when we get stuck in the stress cycle that we start to have that distress, and it starts to really have a negative impact on our life. So we start with sort of the ways to manage the actual stressor at the top of that cycle. How can we limit the amount of stress coming into our lives? How can we stay mindful during the stressful experience and not, again, engage in some of those numbing behaviors or avoidance behaviors? How can we take action to deal with the stress and the stress response within our body, those hormones like cortisol and adrenaline that get released during stressful times? How can we rest and recover? And then how can we sort of restore ourselves and engage in some of those playful and purposeful activities that kind of replenish our energy stores? So we'll talk about each one in a little bit more depth, starting with the stressor. So some different strategies for limiting the amount of stress that comes into our lives. Again, this is a big one. We talk about this with almost all of our clients, but limiting the amount of time on social media, limiting the amount of time you spend watching the news, right? Limiting how many negative messages you're allowing into your space and into your experience. So that's a really key part, is being mindful of the information you're consuming. It might also look like lowering expectations. So again, if you've got a kid who's at home because the daycare shut down, like this is maybe not the week for a home cooked meal every night in a perfectly organized house, right? Maybe things are just going to be a little bit more chaotic, and that's okay. Letting that be okay and recognizing that it's a part of the season we're in, but it doesn't have to be that way forever. But you don't have to put that pressure on yourself, to be working at, a 10 out of 10 all the time. So what are some of your own internal expectations you can, let go of, or at least reduce for the time being? Setting boundaries, saying no to people. It's really hard. We want to say yes and be helpful, but if we overcommit and add to that stress cycle, we're really not going to be able to benefit people in the way we would want to. And so thinking about, what do I really have the time for, commitment for, what brings me joy, what things, do I get a benefit and I get some energy back from saying yes to, and what things really drain me. And what things do I dread doing that maybe I can let go of. And just, again, that mindfulness piece can be helpful about, how is this actually making me feel to say yes to this person? How do I feel when I actually go to that thing and show up? And if it's not adding to your life in a positive way, seeing if that's something you can potentially let go of. We can't always, but sometimes if we can, let go of the things that other people are able to pick up because it's a passion of theirs, or they've been looking for an opportunity to grow in that area, that can be a benefit for everyone. Again, with substances, we want to be mindful because use of too much can actually add negative consequences and additional stress into our lives. And then being mindful of what we can control and what we can't control. And I think the past 2 years have really been a crash course in that. And so that acceptance of, this is not something I'm going to be able to fix, and that's okay. I don't have to fix this. I can maybe do things to make it a little easier on myself, but I don't have to fix the situation, or I can't fix the situation. There can really be some freedom in that as well. So that's managing the incoming stress. Then, while we're in the stressful event, mindfulness strategies to engage in. So all the things we talked about before, but certainly things like journaling. Journaling is a great strategy, especially for kind of that anxiety type of stress. Getting it all out on paper is wonderful in so many ways, partially because especially if you're writing with pen and paper, we can't write as quickly as we think. And so physically forces us to slow down our thoughts and helps us process those thoughts and kind of reality check them. Is this actually accurate? Is this helpful? Or is this my anxiety kind of chattering in my ear over here? Maybe we can start to make those distinctions. Certainly things like meditation, even a quick body scan of just kind of going from head to toe and noticing if there's anywhere you're holding tension that you might be able to release, or any muscles that feel tight that you might be able to stretch. That's a great quick mindfulness strategy just to release some of that pressure in the moment. Deep breathing is probably one of the easiest, most accessible ways to release stress. With our flight or fight response, our body wants to take in oxygen. So we have the energy to run away or fight off the predator that's coming at us. It's a very, kind of evolutionary benefit. And so the only way to override that physically is to take longer exhales. So when we're in flight or fight, we're, breathing in very quickly and not exhaling very much. And so to take long, slow exhales will help reset our brain, get us out of fight or flight, get us back into the rest and digest system, and help get our frontal lobes in our brain back online. Those are, our executive functioning, our problem solving, organization, communication skills, right? They're all up here. And by taking some deep breaths, that will help us get back into that system where we're able to function a little bit more effectively. So a strategy I like to use is square breathing. And it's really straightforward. So the idea is, I like it because there's kind of a visual. You breathe in for 4 counts, and then you hold it for 4 counts, and then you exhale for 8 counts. And so you kind of have to control your exhale. You don't want to, let it all out in one big breath. But having that long controlled exhale, again, kind of helps get you back into the rest and digest and deactivates the flight or fight response. So we'll just do 3 of those quick breaths together. And I just invite you to kind of notice what that's like for you, especially afterwards. But let's take a few deep breaths together. So let's breathe in for 4, in, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, and out. 5, 6, 7, 8. In through the nose, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, Breathe out. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. In. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. And out. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Anyone want to share kind of how they feel after just about 30 seconds of that deep breathing? Does anyone notice a difference?
I think it's relaxing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Almost sleepy.
I know. I know it's 7:15 and we're relaxing. We're gonna go to sleep here pretty soon. But yeah, absolutely. It definitely does help just kind of release some of that stress and anxiety and help bring that energy level down in a good way. So there's a lot of different ways you can do deep breathing. Some do like a 4, 7, 8. But the main thing is to make the exhale longer than the inhale. And you can build up to that. If you can't breathe out for quite that long, do as long as you can and try to build up to having the exhale be longer than the inhale. And, another important strategy is self-compassion. This is the one where we try not to beat ourselves up for being human. So it's natural after snapping at the kids or our partner or screwing up a project at work to want to, kind of punish ourselves, to kind of beat ourselves up and say, oh, that was so stupid. How could you have done that? And, with self-compassion, we're really talking about treating ourselves the way we would treat our best friend, right? If our best friend messed up at work, hopefully, we would not be telling them, oh, you're so stupid. You're going to get fired. Why haven't they fired you yet? Right? We would not want to talk to our best friend that way. So we don't want to talk to ourselves that way either. So being compassionate to ourselves of, you're stressed. You've got a lot going on. It's natural. It happens. Nobody's perfect. And then thinking about, that self-efficacy, that sense of agency piece of what can I do to make it right? So being kind to yourself and then taking some steps, excuse me, to correct it, to make it right. So those are the mindfulness strategies and then the action steps we can take to help our bodies really process the stress. So what happens when we're stressed and in that flight or fight response is that our body releases, again, all sorts of hormones, cortisol, adrenaline, it increases our heart rate and our breathing, and, it gets us ready for a fight. But the thing is, most of us are not fighting off, saber-toothed tigers anymore the way, this was helpful as an evolutionary response. But now the stress is coming as work deadlines or family conflict or different things like that. But our body still needs a physical signal to understand that we're not under threat. And so there are things we need to do to connect physically with our body to help us process and move through that stress response. So talking to someone, right? If we're sitting around, chatting with a neighbor, we probably don't have a saber-toothed tiger chasing us. So even just having a quick social connection with someone helps the body realize, okay, someone else is there. They're talking, they're safe. So it could be reaching out and calling a friend or family member. It could even be as simple as, walking down to or taking a quick drive down to Starbucks or the grocery store and having a little chat with the cashier or the barista who makes your drink, right? Just a quick talk of, hey, how's your day going? How's it been? Even a simple moment of connection like that can help our brains realize, okay, I can take it down a notch. I can relax a little bit. Again, taking action where you can if there's if there's something stressful going on, if you've got that work deadline, maybe it's creating a work plan step by step for, what you're going to do and setting some kind of goalposts for when you're going to complete that by. Or again, if you hurt someone intentionally or unintentionally, or because you were overwhelmed, taking the steps to make that right, make an apology, things like that. A really big one, really the most effective way, especially when it comes to that adrenaline and cortisol, is to move your body. Because when we're stressed and that fight or flight is activated, again, our body's saying you need to fight or run out of there, or, you gotta take action. And so if we're just sitting at our laptop and that's our stress, we never get that signal that, yep, I fought off that predator. Yep, I ran away and now I'm safe. So moving our body, it doesn't have to be an hour-long grind session at the gym. It could be taking a walk for 5 or 10 minutes. It could be doing some what we call bilateral movement, where left, right, anything that engages kind of that cross section of your body is really impactful. That's why walking is so helpful, because you're doing the bilateral left, right, left, right. It could even be some simple stretches, or even just imagining moving your body, doing some guided imagery, especially if you have physical limitations. That can be a great way to make that movement more accessible. So communicating your needs, telling people what you need. Hey, it would be really helpful if you could pick up dinner this week, or if I could push that deadline back a week, right? Feeling comfortable to advocate for yourself and tell people what you need. Journaling's another good one. Again, making sure we're taking care of our physical body. Are we eating? Are we drinking? Are we sleeping? Are we resting? Those are things that are often really easy to overlook, because they aren't things we do, again, when we're under physical threat. So attending to those needs, letting ourselves cry if we need to. If there's been a lot going on, we need to often let that pressure out so it doesn't keep building and building. And with crying, the trick is really to let yourself cry, but again, not to feed the thoughts. So not to tell yourself kind of a story about the crying, or to think about even why you're crying, but to let yourself cry and stay mindful, notice the tears on your face, notice the snot dripping out of your nose, right? Pay attention to the physical sensations, but don't feed it with additional thoughts. And if you can kind of stay focused in that physical sensation of crying, you usually move it through, in a few minutes, actually. Some people are afraid to let themselves cry because they feel like if they let themselves go, they'll never stop. But if you don't feed the crying with additional thoughts, it can be a great way to release some of that pressure. And then creative expression is a great one too. So can you sing, draw, paint, do something, to cook a meal, something that feels creative, write a story, but engage in something creative. Because again, those aren't things we do when we're under threat. So doing something creative signals to your brain that you're okay, that the brain can let the body relax. And you get bonus points for singing, because you also have to exhale longer than you inhale. So you get the benefit of the music, of the creative expression, and that breath work that's kind of naturally built into producing music. And then it's important to rest. If we've been through something stressful, we have to let ourselves rest and recover. So this could be taking breaks from the news. During the Marshall fires, we were very close to the evacuation zone, and I just said at a certain point, we have to turn off the news. This is just too much. So taking breaks, having a system set up so you get the information you need when you need it. But again, taking breaks and being mindful about what you're consuming. Good sleep hygiene techniques of, maybe cutting back on the caffeine, avoiding scrolling on the phone right before bed. Some of those things that if you Google sleep hygiene, there's lots of good information out there. But ways to help yourself get good restorative sleep. And rest can also be finding a healthy mental escape. And so that could be picking up a book or watching a TV show, right? Again, doing it in a purposeful way, not a kind of numbing out kind of way, but it can be a form of rest to let your brain just take a break from what's going on in the current situation. And then again, restoring with some play and purpose. So finding ways to laugh. Laughter is a key one, especially if you can laugh with other people. So, calling up a friend and telling that story that just makes you, laugh out loud and go into stitches every single time. That's a great way to release stress and bring back that joy. Reminiscing, all of it is really good. Spending time in nature, again, doing something creative, trying something new, especially again over the past 2 years, so many of our outside experiences have been so limited. So trying a new recipe or going out to a new restaurant or even taking a drive to a different part of town can really engage the brain in new and fun and kind of innovative ways that help restore and replenish us. Doing something productive. So if you're feeling like really in a funk or really stressed out, one of the best things is again, tackle something manageable. So maybe it's that, closet in the hallway that every time you open the door, stuff falls off on you. Taking the time to kind of declutter it and organize it, can help you have that sense of achievement, sense of accomplishment, sense of self-efficacy that, yep, I can do things and have a positive result in the world. And then finding a way to contribute to the good in the world. Again, that's such a key strategy for helping us remind ourselves that there is good in the world because we're embodying that, and then being able to see the benefits of our effort and then the positive effect it has on us can just be so incredibly restorative. So other thoughts about this stress cycle, things you might want to try. The other thing with play and purpose that I always say is if you don't have anything in your life that feels playful, that's very common. It's again easy for this to really get to the bottom of the to-do list. But think about the things you like to do as a kid. I like to say, think about the things you enjoy doing before you learn to be self-conscious about them. So if you love to dance. You don't have to do it in front of anyone, but let yourself dance, let yourself sing. So often, society tells us we have to be good at something to do it. And, it's not a job. It's not a performance. It's a form of expression. And so is there something you could bring back into your life that, brings you joy, but maybe you just have felt too self-conscious to do that? Those are kind of some ways you can key into things that might feel more playful, more restorative. But any questions or ideas on how you might implement this? Tom, yeah.
Well, I find singing in the shower to be very liberating.
Yes.
And then my wife tells me how bad I feel or I sing, and I ignore her. I just keep singing. So
yeah.
simple things work.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love it. Yeah, we don't have to be good at it to be deserving of it. You're allowed to do it badly, especially if it brings you joy. And that's not the point. The point is not to put on performance worthy of the the Betcher Center or Red Rocks. It's about doing something that restores you because you enjoy it. So all right. So some other resources if you're interested in exploring more after our presentation tonight. These are some books I really love. In particular, the Burnout Book is really great. It's really written for people who are experiencing professional burnout or burnout in their lives. Again, burnout being when that stress just continues and continues and wears us down to the point where we find ourselves having, a lack of empathy, just a lack of caring, feeling like nothing we do is ever going to make a difference. If you're in that spot, or even if you're not in that spot, the Burnout Book is really fantastic. It is written pretty specifically for women, but there's strategies in there that anyone can use. We also have great information, resource sheets on our website. We have recorded webinars. We're planning to put this webinar up on our website as well. So we've got recorded webinars you can take whenever's convenient for you on taming the anxious mind, one specifically on mindfulness and meditation if you're wanting to explore that a little bit further, tips for getting out of a funk. And lots of other things, parenting classes. I've got one on decluttering and hoarding disorder. There's all sorts of information on there. It's really great. So I'd encourage you to check those out. So those are great strategies to use on your own, but I'd encourage you that, if those self-help strategies aren't giving you quite enough relief, that would be a good time to seek out extra support. Similarly, if you have a really hard time saying no, setting boundaries with others, definitely a good time to bring in a support person. If you're experiencing some mental health symptoms that are really, causing you a lot of distress or giving you trouble in your relationships or at work, that's an important time to reach out. Even if you just feel like it would be helpful to talk to someone, that's a perfectly valid reason. It can be so helpful just to have that objective outside party to bring a little bit perspective into your life. But certainly, if you're having any thoughts of self-harm or suicide, we encourage you to reach out right away and get connected to some support and services. So there's lots of places you can go to seek out help. Often your primary care physician can provide some information, make a referral for counseling. They might be able to provide some, initial medications to try to see if that's helpful for things like depression or anxiety. Your insurance provider usually has a list of providers in network that can offer behavioral health services. Colorado Crisis Services is free, available 24/7, open to everyone. That number, 844-493-8255, is staffed 24/7. That's our statewide helpline, crisis line. We are moving to 988. That did get approved through legislation. So just like you can call 911 for emergencies, you will be able to call 988 for mental health emergencies, but we're not quite there yet. So that's a good local number. Staffed 24 hours a day, as is our walk-in center, which is just south of I-70 on Wadsworth Boulevard in Wheat Ridge. So that has been open throughout the pandemic. You can walk in 24 hours a day if you or someone if you're concerned and you're needing someone to talk to. If your employer offers an employee assistance program, that can be a great way to get access to counseling. And then there are different websites like Psychology Today that have listings of mental health professionals, and you can kind of view different profiles and find someone who's a good fit for you based on insurance and kind of what you're looking for in terms of support. But certainly us at Jefferson Center, we are here as well. We serve everyone, the whole age spectrum from children to older adults, families, individuals, with a lot of different services, both mental health treatment as well as more of these wellness and education programs as well too. And our Speakers Bureau is available if you'd like us to come out and present on a topic. This is a free service we offer to our community. All the presentations are given by licensed mental health professionals. So it's a great way to learn more about a topic if you've got something that you have a group or an organization or your employer would like to hear more about. And then this is our website. If you'd like to learn more about the other classes we offer things like mental health first aid, question, persuade, refer, which is a suicide prevention training, all about how to talk to someone about if you're concerned about them. Lots of different events, lots of different ways to get connected. So definitely check us out. And this is my contact information here if you'd like to reach out to me directly after the program. But I will pause here. I know we're at 7:30, but I'm happy to stay a little bit longer if anyone has any questions or feedback or anything they'd like to share.
Well, just what's worked for me when I get into a funk, and I'm sure other people do this too, is to go back in over your life and think of the 1, 2, or 3 times when you were just happy as can be. And go what was going on in your life at that time. Why were you so happy? Who was with you? And what that does, in my mind, it reminds you that life is a bunch of hills and valleys. And if you're in a valley, remember all of the hills you were on top of in years past. So that allows you to remind yourself that you're a human being, and then we all have these ups and downs. So I just find that very simple. And I try to have a catalog of these things that I can think about.
Definitely. That'd be a good thing to put in that stress management kit, like a little reminder of a great memory that always brings you some happiness. I love that. Thanks for sharing that, Tom.
That's an interesting way to look at it. Mine's not too different in that I try to remember that this too shall pass.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
that I've been here before, and to try to be patient with myself. Because sometimes you just have those funks, and
Yeah.
sometimes it has to do with weather, the time of year, things that have happened. I mean, you talked about the Marshall Fire. I don't know about anybody else, but in my opinion, that was one of the worst weeks that we've had around here in a long time, between the fire and the mass shooting and the time of year. It just was a terrible week for everyone. Not to mention the victims involved and the families, but it just was a very difficult time. And then it led into January. And for me personally, January is a very tough month, just for me personally.
Mhm.
It's the time of year, and it's after Christmas, and you've had a lot of togetherness, and then you don't. And it's just a weather thing. And so that's always a struggle that time of year. And I just have to remember, my motivation's low, and it's just kind of a confluence of things. And I just have to remember, okay, it's gonna pass. Just gotta move through it, get some exercise, keep going, eat right, get sleep. So it's kind of the same thing you're talking about, Tom, but you just gotta remember that it's a trough. Move through it, keep going, one step in front of the other.
Yeah. And have that a good time to practice that self-compassion too, right?
Yeah.
I think sometimes more of the suffering comes from feeling like, oh, why am I feeling like this? What am I doing wrong? But again, to
Right.
remember, yep, there are natural highs and lows, and I'm just, gonna let myself, go through this time, but I'm gonna take care of myself too, and remember that, yeah, this too shall pass. So
Yeah,
I really like that, Angie. Thank you for sharing that.
sure. I guess the other thing I wanted to say is I think your presentation was great. I really enjoyed it. Kind of covered a lot of things, and a lot of good food for thought. So I really appreciate it. Very well done.
Thank you so much. So,
Yeah.
it was a pleasure to be here.